Imagine being a soldier on the losing side of a global conflict, captured far from home, and suddenly finding yourself in a land so vast, so unfamiliar, that it almost feels unreal. This is exactly what hundreds of German prisoners of war experienced when they were transported to the American West during World War II. For men who had known the relentless destruction of battlefields in Europe and North Africa, America was more than a country. It was a revelation. The journey itself was exhausting. Weeks of travel by ship across the Atlantic left many seasick, homesick, and unsure of what awaited them. When they finally arrived, the trains and trucks carried them through wide plains, past golden fields and distant mountains. Everything was different. The air seemed cleaner, the skies taller, and the land endless. For soldiers used to crowded European towns and bombed-out cities, the West was almost surreal. Their destination was a network of POW camps built in remote areas, often near small frontier towns. Barbed wire and guard towers reminded them that they were still captives, yet the atmosphere inside the camps was unlike anything they had anticipated. Officers greeted them with calm authority, and guards, though watchful, were surprisingly polite. Meals were served on time, blankets were clean, and tents or barracks were spacious. There was order here, but not cruelty, and that realization left many prisoners stunned. From the very first day, the German POWs noticed the astonishing differences between life in America and the war-torn landscapes they had left behind. Food alone was enough to challenge their expectations. Plates overflowed with fresh fruit, eggs, and meats, a stark contrast to the thin rations and wartime scarcity they had endured in Europe. A cold glass of lemonade, a warm slice of cornbread, even a hearty stew became small miracles, reminders of abundance and care in a world they had only known as harsh and unforgiving. Beyond food, the POWs were struck by the sheer openness of the land. Rolling plains stretched farther than the eye could see, dotted with cattle, horses, and ranchers at work. Cowboys rode past the camp, lasso in hand, embodying a freedom that seemed almost mythical. To men who had fought under rigid hierarchies and in tightly controlled environments, the sight was both inspiring and disorienting. They had never seen such space, such light, such a sense of possibility. But it wasn't just the scenery that captured their attention, it was the people. Americans in the West were courteous, curious, and unexpectedly generous. Guards treated them with respect, answering questions patiently, explaining rules clearly, and providing medical care without hesitation. Even small gestures, offering directions, sharing news, or simply acknowledging a prisoner's presence felt revolutionary to men who had been conditioned to expect harshness and suspicion. Daily life in the camps combined structure with surprising freedoms. Roll calls, work details, and inspections maintained order, but prisoners also had opportunities to read, write letters home, and socialize. Some organized orchestras, playing instruments salvaged or provided by the Americans. Others engaged in sports, soccer, baseball, or improvised games in open fields. Laughter, once rare in their lives, became common. They began to see the Americans not as faceless enemies, but as human beings with their own strengths, struggles, and kindnesses. Work assignments became a window into American life. Many POWs were sent to farms and ranches, helping with crops, livestock, and irrigation projects. Though laborious, it offered lessons in ingenuity and scale. Fields stretched endlessly, horses pulled plows across golden expanses, and cattle grazed under skies so vast they seemed infinite. For soldiers used to crowded European towns and bombed-out cities, the West was almost surreal. Baseball, a sport they had only glimpsed in movies or radio broadcasts, became a source of joy and cultural exchange. Initially awkward at catching or batting, the prisoners laughed at their mistakes, bonding with each other and sometimes even with American observers. Music, too, was transformative. Jazz, swing, and folk tunes introduced rhythms entirely new to their ears. Through sport and song, a bridge formed between two very different cultures. Religion and education were also unexpectedly available. POWs could practice their faith openly, attend services, and even engage in discussions with American chaplains. Some enrolled in language or vocational classes, learning skills that might serve them after the war. The focus was not merely on confinement, it was on growth, understanding, and even human connection. Yet, this story is not just about comfort or leisure. Homesickness was constant, and the memories of family, friends, and familiar landscapes weighed heavily on many men. Some struggled with boredom, frustration, or resentment. Discipline was strict, and occasionally tensions flared. But even these challenges were tempered by fairness, compassion, and a sense of order rarely found on the battlefields they left behind. As weeks turned into months, the prisoners began to record their observations. They noted the ingenuity of American farming, the friendliness of townsfolk, and the astonishing expanse of open land. Letters sent home often described an America that was almost unbelievable, clean, abundant, and strangely humane. Soldiers who had expected hostility found themselves respecting and sometimes even admiring the country holding them captive. The landscape itself left a lasting impression. Vast plains, towering mountains, and endless skies seemed to symbolize opportunity, freedom, and perspective. At night, silence enveloped the camps, broken only by the sounds of wildlife and the wind through grasslands. Many prisoners sketched or wrote in journals, capturing scenes of ranches, farms, and small towns, moments of beauty and astonishment amid the ongoing reality of war. By the end of the first months, the German POWs' perceptions of America had transformed. They had arrived expecting hostility, scarcity, and confinement. Instead, they discovered respect, abundance, and a surprising degree of freedom within the boundaries of captivity. They saw Americans not as enemies, but as individuals with their own strengths, struggles, and humanity. The shock was profound, and in many cases, life-changing. This was the astonishing story of German POWs in the American West. A story of contrasts, war and peace, fear and curiosity, confinement and discovery. It is a story of soldiers who, despite being on the losing side, found themselves witnesses to a society striving for decency, fairness, and opportunity. For these men, the American West was more than a place of captivity. It was a revelation. A land so vast, so open, and so full of life that it challenged every expectation, reshaped every prejudice, and left an imprint on their hearts and minds that would endure long after the war ended. And as they gazed across the golden plains, listened to the wind through distant trees, and watched cowboys ride into the horizon, one thing became clear. Sometimes, history's most astonishing moments happen not on the battlefield, but in the quiet spaces where humanity endures.
When the initial shock of arrival faded, the German POWs began to experience the American West in ways they had never imagined. Life in the camps, though still structured and supervised, offered opportunities that were both fascinating and bewildering. What had seemed a temporary, confining arrangement gradually became a landscape of discovery, cultural exchange, and at times even friendship. The first weeks were dominated by routine. Roll calls punctuated the mornings, work details stretched through the days, and lights out marked the evenings. Yet within this regimented schedule, there were pockets of freedom. POWs could explore the campgrounds, interact with fellow prisoners, or simply sit under the vast skies and contemplate a world far removed from the horrors of the European front. The expansiveness of the West, the quiet nights, and the sheer openness of the land left many prisoners awestruck. For men who had seen cities reduced to rubble and villages emptied by war, these plains seemed almost surreal. One of the most startling elements was the treatment by Americans. Guards, far from the cruel or indifferent captors some had anticipated, often acted with a mixture of professionalism and humanity. Small acts of kindness, offering a drink of water, explaining a task patiently, or even sharing a smile, became monumental in the eyes of soldiers used to suspicion and harsh discipline. Some POWs began to form tentative connections, conversations carried out in broken English, gestures, and shared humor, bridging the language gap. Work assignments offered both purpose and insight into a foreign society. Many German soldiers were sent to ranches, farms, or construction projects. They plowed fields, tended livestock, repaired fences, and even helped with local harvests. The labor was demanding, but the surroundings were extraordinary. Endless fields stretched under brilliant skies, herds of cattle grazed in orderly pastures, and horses moved with a precision and skill that fascinated the POWs. Some began to realize that they were participating in a life entirely unlike the crowded, battle-scarred Europe they had known, a life defined by space, abundance, and rhythm. Cowboys, in particular, became figures of fascination. The prisoners watched as these men rode effortlessly across fields, ropes in hand, guiding cattle with skill and authority. It was a display of physical prowess and self-reliance that the POWs had rarely encountered. Some attempted to mimic the rides, learning to manage horses and even trying their hand at roping. Though clumsy at first, laughter often replaced frustration, and these moments of shared activity created an unusual sense of camaraderie. Here, amidst work and recreation, soldiers glimpsed a form of freedom that was unimaginable in Europe. Food continued to astonish. Breakfasts, lunches, and dinners in the camp offered variety and quantity the POWs had only dreamed of. Eggs, milk, fresh vegetables, meats, and even desserts became symbols of a world that functioned differently from the rationed, scarcity-driven existence of wartime Germany. Some soldiers described these meals in letters home, struggling to convey the sense of abundance and care. A simple serving of fresh fruit or a warm slice of pie could provoke amazement, underscoring just how starkly life in America differed from their prior experiences. Leisure activities became central to life in the camp. Baseball, a game initially alien to many prisoners, became a favorite pastime. Guards, local townspeople, and POWs formed teams, laughing as clumsy catches and missed swings gave way to skill and competition. Soccer, too, remained popular, blending familiarity with new rules and challenges. Music, both classical and modern, found its place in evenings and weekends. Some POWs played instruments brought from home, others were introduced to American jazz and swing. Through sport and song, barriers between captor and captive slowly eroded, replaced by shared enjoyment and cultural curiosity. Letters and communication became lifelines. Though censored, correspondence from home reminded POWs of the world they had left behind. Each envelope brought news of family, hints of life beyond the war, and emotional reassurance. Yet they also served as a tool of reflection. Writing letters encouraged prisoners to articulate their impressions of America, from the vast landscapes and abundant meals to the unexpected civility of their captors. Many found themselves describing experiences that felt almost surreal, moments of astonishment at the humanity around them. Education and self-improvement were encouraged within the camp. POWs had access to books, language lessons, and vocational training. Some took courses in carpentry, mechanics, or agriculture, acquiring skills that might serve them after the war. Instructors guided them patiently, and classrooms often became spaces for discussion and exchange. Learning, whether practical or intellectual, became a means of engagement, a way to pass time, and a source of hope for the future. Religion and spirituality remained significant. POWs were allowed to practice their faith openly, attend services, and gather for small religious meetings. American chaplains visited frequently, offering guidance, support, and sometimes friendship. For soldiers who had endured years of conflict, the opportunity to exercise spiritual practice freely was both comforting and eye-opening. It reinforced the sense that, despite captivity, humanity and dignity were respected here in ways they had not experienced before. Despite these opportunities, challenges persisted. Homesickness, boredom, and the constant awareness of being a prisoner weighed heavily on many men. Some struggled with the monotony of camp life or the frustration of adapting to unfamiliar rules and routines. Occasional disagreements flared among prisoners, requiring intervention from guards. Yet even in these moments, fairness prevailed. The enforcement of rules was often tempered by reason, and discipline was rarely cruel. This treatment, contrasting sharply with the harsh military environments many POWs had known, left lasting impressions. Interactions with local townspeople added another layer of astonishment. Residents of nearby towns, curious yet cautious, sometimes offered friendly greetings or small gestures of assistance. Some POWs were allowed supervised trips into town for work assignments or cultural exchanges, observing daily life beyond the camp. Markets, diners, and local gatherings offered windows into a society that was orderly, industrious, and surprisingly welcoming. The POWs noted these observations carefully, comparing them to the destruction and deprivation they had left behind in Europe. Cultural shock was an ongoing theme. Simple habits, gestures, and customs seemed strange, even astonishing. The openness of the land, the friendliness of strangers, and the relative freedom of daily life contrasted sharply with what POWs expected from an enemy nation. Yet, through these differences, they began to learn about the resilience, creativity, and kindness that defined American society in the West. These lessons were subtle but profound, reshaping perceptions of a world once seen only through propaganda and rumor.
As months turned into years, the German POWs in the American West began to experience the full spectrum of life far from home. What had started as a journey marked by fear, uncertainty, and isolation gradually transformed into a story of astonishing contrasts between war and peace, captivity and freedom, expectation and reality. The prisoners discovered that life behind the barbed wire was far more complex and unexpectedly humane than they could have imagined. One of the most striking developments was the relationships that formed with Americans, both guards and local residents. Initially tentative and formal, these connections slowly evolved into mutual respect and, in some cases, genuine friendship. POWs who worked on farms or ranches observed the skill, endurance, and ingenuity of the people around them. Cowboys, who at first seemed mysterious and unapproachable, became subjects of admiration and occasionally friendly competition. German soldiers attempted to learn riding techniques, assist in cattle drives, and even share their own agricultural knowledge. In these moments, barriers between captor and captive began to blur. Children in nearby towns were particularly fascinated by the prisoners. Many POWs recalled being approached by curious youngsters, shyly peeking through fences or waving from across dusty roads. Some soldiers, longing for the innocence and warmth of home, responded in kind, teaching simple games, sharing stories, or even showing off their own skills in soccer or music. These small interactions created lasting memories, demonstrating that even in wartime, humanity could transcend fear and propaganda. Cultural exchange extended beyond casual interaction. POWs were often encouraged to participate in educational programs within the camps. Language classes, vocational training, and access to books allowed prisoners to expand their horizons. Some learned carpentry, mechanics, or agricultural techniques, skills that would prove valuable after the war. Others explored American literature, history, and music, gaining a broader understanding of the society that had captured them. For many, these opportunities were transformative, reshaping their worldviews and planting seeds of curiosity that would endure long after repatriation. Music and entertainment became essential parts of daily life. POWs formed orchestras and small ensembles, performing German folk songs alongside American jazz and swing tunes introduced by guards or local residents. Camp concerts became communal events, fostering connection and lightening the burdens of confinement. Baseball remained a popular pastime, with tournaments organized between POWs, guards, and even occasional local participants. The game became a symbol of integration and cultural exchange, as laughter, competition, and teamwork replaced suspicion and fear. Yet the life of a POW was not without tension and conflict. Homesickness remained pervasive, and the longing for family, familiar foods, and their homeland weighed heavily on many soldiers. Some prisoners struggled with boredom or frustration at the monotony of camp routines. Disputes occasionally erupted between prisoners, requiring intervention by camp officers. However, these challenges were mitigated by a system that emphasized fairness, humane treatment, and opportunity for self-expression. The contrast with the harsh conditions and arbitrary cruelty they had endured in Europe made these moments of discipline easier to accept. Work assignments continued to provide both purpose and insight.
POWs labored on farms, ranches, and public works projects, often contributing to communities in meaningful ways. Their efforts were recognized, and occasionally they were allowed supervised excursions into nearby towns. These trips revealed a side of American life that was orderly, industrious, and yet generous. Farmers invited prisoners to share meals. Townspeople offered assistance, and simple acts of kindness reinforced the extraordinary humanity surrounding the prisoners. Medical care remained another area of astonishment. Illnesses and injuries were treated promptly and efficiently. POWs marveled at the attention, cleanliness, and professionalism of American doctors and nurses. The availability of medicine, proper nutrition, and sanitary facilities created a level of care far removed from what many had experienced in wartime Europe. The quality of attention underscored the stark contrast between the devastation they had left behind and the life they now led. Religious practice flourished. POWs were free to attend services, hold small gatherings, and consult with American chaplains. Spiritual life became a source of comfort, reflection, and connection. In a time of uncertainty and separation from home, the ability to practice faith openly reinforced a sense of dignity and purpose. For some, these experiences prompted deep reflection on their own lives and values. As the war neared its end, thoughts of home became more pressing. Many POWs wondered what awaited them in Germany, which had been ravaged by conflict. Letters from family carried news of loss, recovery, and change, adding urgency and poignancy to their reflections. Yet the experiences in America, the kindness, abundance, and opportunities for growth left a lasting imprint. Prisoners had seen firsthand a society that, even in wartime, maintained order, decency, and humanity. The release of prisoners was a complex and emotional process. Repatriation involved logistical coordination, medical checks, and administrative clearance. For many POWs, the moment of departure was bittersweet. Relief and anticipation of home mingled with nostalgia for the unexpected lessons, friendships, and experiences that had shaped their time in the American West. Some returned to Germany with stories of cowboys, baseball games, jazz music, and acts of kindness that defied wartime animosity. Others carried practical skills and cultural insights that would influence their post-war lives. Yet, the experiences in America left a lasting imprint. Prisoners had seen firsthand a society that even in wartime maintained order, decency, and humanity. The story of German POWs in the American West is not just a tale of captivity. It is a story of astonishment, adaptation, and human connection. These soldiers arrived expecting fear, scarcity, and hostility, yet they found abundance, civility, and opportunities for growth. Through work, sport, music, and interaction with locals, they discovered that humanity could exist even within the confines of war. They learned lessons that reshaped perceptions of the world, challenged assumptions, and left an enduring legacy of cultural exchange.